Mike Holmes, welcome to another podcast, the Holmes on Holmes podcast. Today we are going to be talking about e-charging for the future, electric cars. You're not going to want to miss this. Going to be speaking with James Fraser. He's the general manager at ESA, and this man knows everything to do when it comes to charging your car at home. With the soaring costs of fuel right now, which is absolutely ridiculous, on another podcast that I'd love to do, what's going to happen is everybody's going to jump on electric vehicles, including myself, because right now I'm even looking at the Ford truck Lightning, I believe it's called, because it's good for me. I got a generator at home if I need it, and it is the future. But how do we plug this stuff in? James, years ago when electric cars came out and I was starting to be interested in them, and I remember this, people were plugging them in their stove line, because it was pretty simple to do. If you didn't have an electrician, they got an adapter. You can plug your car in through the window or whatever you have to do, run an extension cord. There wasn't really any rules at the beginning, even though with the Electrical Safety Authority, you touch electrical, you need a permit, correct?
Yep.
And it's been for years.
It's been that way for 100 years.
What is happening about cars today? All of a sudden, a lot of people are buying electric cars. I don't blame them. I really don't. I mean, it is the future. We're thinking about being environmentally friendly. But when you can buy things online, here's one here. You can buy things online, and that's a charger for your house to install that's not even approved by this country, correct?
That's correct.
People are installing this. What is the biggest thing you're seeing right now with the e-charges at home?
What we're seeing is that people are not aware of the load that the e-charger represents. This is a continuous load. So it's not like your stove or your dryer that has a cycle that cycles on and off. This is something that is continually charging for 8-10 hours at a time, and it is the biggest electrical load on the panel in the house.
Was it when they first came out?
When they first came out, they were often using level 1 chargers, which were a lot slower rate. They charge at a slower, they draw less current, they charge at a slower rate, so they take a longer period to charge the actual vehicle. So that's typically what you saw. People are still using some of those level 1 chargers, which are, you know, your plug-in into an outlet. But they were not aware of they're not aware of the fact that it's continuous.
And we're going to talk about that in detail, but I want to move backwards for a minute. Let's move backwards. My mind tells me when it comes to batteries, especially to cars, see, I bought the Harley Davidson motorcycle, the electric one. Love the bike, I really do. It's a magnificent bike. I've never been on a motorcycle in my life that I don't hear the engine. I hit it and all I hear is wind, birds, crickets, and frogs. It's unbelievable driving my bike around my property. The smartest thing you can do for my motorcycle, and correct me if I'm wrong, at the time, was to slow charge your batteries and not speed charge. So what's happened is we got used to this convenience thing, and we can charge your car in 10 hours, but we just got to hit it with power. So there's a twofold here. One, we're not really thinking about the lifetime of the battery and charging it properly. We're looking at convenience of coming home and hitting it with a big charge so you can get up in the morning and drive the car again. Let's move in back from that. When they first started, nobody really had the power packs at home. This opened a new business out there, e-charging stations across the country, across the United States, everywhere there's e-charging stations. I didn't know this until I bought the motorcycle. I got the app, and all of a sudden I'm looking everywhere. I can actually charge my motorcycle wherever I go. In my mind, I'm looking at it, I want to prolong the battery life. I know if I overcharge it, which we're going to talk about what can happen in your home, that I can kill the batteries. So the lifelong of the batteries becomes shorter, and at the same time, I'm not, who's winning when you're overcharging? No one's winning. So let's turn this subject into, I want everyone to be aware, if you touch electrical, you need a permit. It's as simple as that. I don't care where you live. Here in this country, Canada, especially Ontario, we want to make sure through ESA, Electrical Safety Authority, that you get a permit. If you don't get a permit, you can be fined. Anyone that touches your electrical can be fined. They can fine all kinds of money. And by the way, I'll talk about that one later, because this one's really going to surprise you. What happens if your house actually catches on fire? Because everyone was stupid. We're seeing that a lot of people out there are not getting a permit to install e-chargers at your home.
That's correct. We're seeing that.
Why?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what the mentality is, but some people will, the contractor may ask, do you want to get a permit, or you might save some money? I'm not sure where the idea comes from, but I can tell you that we are seeing a significant number of these e-chargers being put in with no permits in our system. And every one of those has defects, some of them very serious, that are causing us concern because, as you indicated, there's potential for an electrical fire, and people could not only lose their home, but possibly harm some of their members of their family, which, for my mind, that should be #1 priority.
Yeah, your family, your kids. It's where you live. It's where your photos are. It's where your life is. If you plug in a small little ceramic heater that's 1,500 watts to a receptacle, it can take that. But we tell everyone out there that's only to give you heat in an emergency, not on a daily basis, not on a 24-hour or all winter period, because even that 1,500 watt heater is going to overload that receptacle. It's not going to blow the breaker unless you got a fuse, and people that still have fuses will tend to take out the 15 amp fuse and put in a 20 or 25 because it's an inconvenience to change that fuse. My point to this one here is that's 15 amps of power. It can cause an electrical fire to your home, and as a matter of fact, probably in the last 20 years was the #1 electrical fire besides your dryer being wired incorrectly. It's about a big draw. So let's talk about the cars. At the beginning, the actual amperage draw was 32, what was it?
It was approximately between 30 and 32 amps.
So they would run a 40 amp breaker for that. So it was never more than that. And even then, at the beginning, it was a gentle charge. It wasn't a power charge, correct?
Correct.
So nowadays, we've come up with even better electric cars, and Mercedes is doing it, BMW is doing it, and I've seen a lot of beautiful electric vehicles. These are all in the 48 amp range, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so with a 48 amp, they're gonna need a 60 amp breaker.
That's right.
So for a moment, let's say somebody, just because we're gonna say on the nice side that everyone was smart, there was a couple of homeowners that had the first phase of an electric vehicle. They put in a 40 amp breaker. It was set for about 30, 32 amps of draw. It was a slow trickle charge within reason. It wasn't a slow 15 amp trickle charge, but it's a heavier charge, but not like today's vehicles. They claim that when they sell that house, we even have an e-charge. It's been installed. Nobody ever asked for permits. How many times I gotta say this? You buy a house, if something's been upgraded, you ask them, okay, did you get permits? So when I buy that house, I can see that everything has permits and it's been done properly. But selling that house with a 40 amp breaker load for that vehicle at the time doesn't mean you can plug in a new vehicle today. Number one problem I'm seeing. It's actually number 2, because the #1 problem I'm seeing is really everyone is just hiring Bob or Carrie or Joe to run the electrical for their vehicles. We're going to show you some photos really soon about some really foolish people that have run strange ways to power their vehicle. Shouldn't everybody right now be saying, okay, buy the car? I mean, you were magical on this, James, when you said we should be thinking about our family and our kids. Who do I call in to get an e-charge in my house? Well, first thing is a licensed electrical contractor, #1. But it seems to be, are the places that are selling the cars recommending people to come in and put in an e-charge?
Yeah, we are seeing that. We're seeing some of this, what we call white glove service from some of these very high-end companies, and they're recommending people, but we're still not seeing the permits. So it concerns us that the message is not getting to the from the dealership level. We're having issues, and we want to obviously get the message out that we want people to use licensed electrical contractors. We want them to take out a permit, ask for that certificate of acceptance at the end, so they have that actual proof to show that the installation met code. Because the defects that we're finding on these installations are really life-threatening. We call them life and or property defects. They're the highest level that we rate them. We've seen circuit breakers literally melted in the panel board because they were undersized. You talked about it earlier, where they had a 40 amp breaker with wired with number 8 wire, which is correct. But then all of a sudden, what do? They get their smartphone out. They do a couple steps. Within like 2 or 3 steps, they change it to a 60 amp or a 48 amp charge. And all of a sudden, boom, you have a problem now, because now you're overloading the wire and the breaker in the panel, and it literally turns it to charcoal. And
okay, I understand this, and I think that everyone out there is going to look at this and say, is this just a call to spend some money to get a permit? No. Let's get that straight. No. This is about your home, your safety, and we're going to go into detail on this because I need you to understand this. Let's first go back before an electric car. And by the way, electric cars came out in, what was it, 1912, 1901?
Yeah.
In that neighborhood.
Yeah.
It was before the gasoline vehicle.
yeah, that's right.
Which, funny how that changed. But anyways, there's so many subjects I can go into when it comes to the electric car. The number one draw of your house before electric cars was your stove. It's a 40 amp breaker. Everyone knows this. Your dryer second. It's a 30 amp breaker. This was a world without air conditioning back years ago. This was a world without hot tubs. This was the normal world that everyone lived in. So when I say that, I'm talking about a home that is years old. And until we upgrade that or change that, it could have 100 amps of power, and most of them did. They could have had 60 amps of power. Then we'd upgrade to 100 amps. Today, everything's built with 200 amps, but we're talking about older houses really at this point. The stove. Who at home runs all 4 burners and the oven at the same time? But even if you did, it has been calculated at 40 amp breaker. The size cable of line, which I believe is an 8 gauge line that runs to the panel. This is all acceptable for the amount of amperage that runs through those lines, not to burn them, not to melt the breaker, not to do anything. But even your stove at the time is variable temperature in the oven. It means it's going to go up and down. It's not going to be power surged, meaning full amperage 24 hours a day. We cook for an hour. We cook for 3 hours. The cars today are actually going to be a 48 amp draw, which requires a 60 amp breaker. It's not all of them, it's the new ones. But we need to think this way. That charge is a 10-hour charge of full 48 amps, which makes this the biggest draw in your home. You said this earlier.
That's correct.
So there is nothing on the market now, not even a hot tub right now that draws that much power. Even though a lot of the bigger hot tubs are on a 60 amp breaker, it's still not drawing that kind of power. That's about the 2 motors, boom, the surge, the kick in that it needs to require to hold that, then they balance out, runs the tub nice and smoothly, that amperage has been dropped. But it doesn't drop in the electric car, which means it's 100% 48 amps pulling for 10 hours straight. If you understand that, if that line is on an 8 gauge 40 amp breaker and it's drawing 48 amps for 10 hours, it means it's overloading the wire, it's overloading the breaker, and all of a sudden, this is where you're talking, we've seen fried, literally burnt, charred breakers in the panel. This is a big problem, really big problem. And the reason this is a big problem is because this is the #1 thing that's going to start a fire in your home. Probably why we're not seeing a lot of it yet is because the breakers are really better today than they were days before. So if your panel's old, don't mess around. And don't ever mess around. Like, you got to get a permit. This is because things need to be done right. If there was a fire in your home because the breaker wasn't sized right, the wire wasn't sized right, and wait till I show you the stupid photos here, insurance isn't going to cover you. So your house burns, insurance is not going to cover it. Let me tell you why insurance is not going to cover it. You didn't get a permit. It was done by a Joe Blow, and sorry, Joe, I'm using your name, but it was done by a Joe Blow. When I say a Joe Blow, I mean someone that doesn't know enough of what they're doing. And it's not that they don't care about you, it's just they're not thinking. They're not thinking of what can happen by not knowing enough. The insurance companies has a way out. It means you didn't do it properly, the permit wasn't pulled, the process was not put in place, and insurance companies has the legal right to say, I'm sorry, we are not fixing the house that burnt down. And hopefully nobody died in the house, because that could be just even worse than your house, losing your home and your pictures, and that would be horrible. Is there anything you want to add right now? Because I'm going to keep going.
I just want to make sure that people understand that we have a website that they can go to, esasafe.com, and you can find a contractor to find a licensed electrical contractor, look for those approved products, make sure that they're properly approved, so none of this do-it-yourself stuff, which you were talking about. We've got some of those pictures there to show you. And we also want to make sure that people understand that we want to get the work inspected. So if there was a defect, it's caught before that final certificate of inspection is issued. And we want to make sure that those defects are fixed so that people, listen, we're all about public safety. We're not in your home.
It's not about money.
It's not about money. A permit is inexpensive. A permit, you get like $79 to pull a permit. You're spending, what, like $100,000, maybe $150,000 on some of these new cars? What's a permit cost? It's nothing. It's not about the money. It's about safety, and it's about public confidence that what's being done is being done to the code. The code is the minimum standard. If they exceed it, great.
There's people out there, unfortunately, that think by pulling a permit, my world, engineering, structural, HVAC, engineering of the HVAC, everything requires a permit. And I don't want people to think that this is just a cash grab. It's just, you know, this is about bringing in the professionals to oversee and verify that the work that was done is safe to a minimum code, and that nobody should die in case of an accident. That's just some simple English. If you didn't do a structural permit on your home and the house caves in, you got a problem. Again, insurance isn't going to cover it, but this is something that we need to pay attention to. The reason we are talking about this today is because this has become very clear that we are jumping in a direction largely due to oil prices. And now I'd like to show you what a picture looks like. Look at this one here. That's what a breaker looks like when it's fried. And that's because it's been overloaded. And what's going to happen is this is going to slowly burn. You may be sleeping very slowly, very slowly. It's because it's heated up to the point it cannot handle that kind of amperage or that kind of draw. This is going to slowly burn, and if everything's good within the panel, it shouldn't start a fire, but it doesn't mean it won't. It doesn't mean it won't, because these lines can actually get so hot that it will actually, the plastic around the line can catch fire. And once you get a little flame in the panel, what's around the panel, it doesn't take much to burn your house down. It just doesn't. It's that simple. But I've got other photos. This is just about wiring it incorrectly, which we're seeing way too much. Then I've got other photos. Here's one on the outside of your home, and you can look at it on your own yourself. Here's one on the outside of your home that they ran a stove plug outside. Now that stove plug is for the inside of your house, not meant to be outside. It's not GFI protected. So let's think for a second. We're going to plug a 40 amp line, which is 8 gauge, to the car from this receptacle. And what if it's raining outside? What if it's snowing outside? And you walk outside and your feet get wet. Do you know you're 100% grounded? And if anything happens to that electrical, you got it. And that's something you're not going to survive. You might as well get hit by lightning. I know lightning's a lot more, but that is something that's going to drop you big time. Then we get into stupidity. It's snowing outside, and we're running extension cords to the car. And again, this is run from the inside of the house. So it is not electrically protected. What this means is we have somebody that's living on a street, and they don't have a garage, which is unfortunate, and they want to charge their vehicle into their home, and they got to do it on the street. So somebody's trying to be safe and put out a couple pylons so they don't trip on it, or they're aware that somebody has run an electrical cable to their car, which is drawing a crap load of power. Here's another one. Somebody's attached to their fence. I'll show you this one. They've attached it to their fence and again to the car. And I'm wondering if it's the same house. No, it's not the same house, it's the same color car. By doing all of this, you are not only possibly causing your own personal problems, but you could cause somebody else's accidental death by walking by. This is an absolute no. I don't even know how people are getting away with this. Here's somebody that ran it out their window. Right from their stove receptacle, ran out their window. This is the same as anything else we're talking about here, because you're not running it on a proper E-charge area. You're just tapping into power, trying to build the batteries on your car. My God, I can show you picture after picture after picture. I'm sure there's 1,000 of them out there, or 100,000, even 1,000,000, because this is what's happening. How important is it for you to think of the electrical in your home, the safety of people walking around it, the safety of your children, and the safety of your house? I'm going to tell you one thing. If you do this wrong, you can possibly burn your house down, which insurance won't cover. You can possibly kill another human being or yourself, because this power is so big that you do not want to be zapped by this. You do not want to play with this. This is something that will stop your heart. Stopping your heart. How do we start your heart when they stop your heart?
They actually give you the paddles.
Clear, boom. That's what they do. They give you, that start your heart.
Yeah.
A big enough shock will stop your heart. And now you got to require somebody else to get your heart going again, as long as it didn't fry your breaker, which is your heart. This is a subject right now that to me is really important. When I heard we wanted to talk about this, I was like, yes, 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 because I can explain the electrical. And I'm seeing, and probably you are too, is the stupidity of all of this. I'm only calling it stupidity because it's actually ignorance. And ignorance is because we don't know. We think we can do things a certain way and other people are doing it, it's not an issue. But if you're going to do something, you need to know everything you can about that for the safety of everyone. When we talked about the stove and we move into the charge of the car, we're now at 48 amps, way above the stove. It sounds like it's not, because from 40 amps to 48, the difference is the 40 amp was designed for the stove that is not using 40 amps of power on a continuous basis. But the E-charge is using 48 amps of power for a 10-hour range, nonstop, consistently. My daughter's house. She moved in with a wonderful guy, new guy. He's got an e-car, he's got an electric car. My daughter's got an electric car. There's 2 of them in the garage. That means they're drawing, how much? 88 amps every day when the 2 of them pull their car in from work. They plug it in for 10 hours, 5 hours, depending on how much power they need or how low the battery is. So timeline is if you're empty, it's going to be 10 hours, maybe even more.
Level 2 chargers could do it in a little less. It depends, but from an empty, if the battery is completely run dry, yeah, it would take about 6 to 8 hours to charge.
Okay, and that's a level 2.
That's a level 2.
Okay,
yep.
See, I didn't know that. There's a level 1. There's a level 2. I know
1.
power.
Yep, level 1 charger.
Do we have a level 3?
Yep, we have a level 3.
Do.
Yep, we have a level 3. That's commercial. That's typically DC. Goes in at about 800 volts DC, and they will charge it. They can charge full charge in about 20 minutes.
So these would be equivalent, I take it that the E-charging stations that are throughout the country are going to be a level 3?
Yeah, they're level 3 chargers that are at most of the...
And all of these have permits. All of these have
Absolutely.
licensed electrical contractors doing it. There is no, because you screw that up. You know why it's done so big in commercial is because it involves everyone else. Meaning, here's the greatest example. In your home, you have one person or one family. In a commercial place, you have all kinds of families. So we need to look at it that way. And that's why a commercial code is so much stronger than residential. It doesn't mean that we should forego or miss what we can do in our own homes when it comes to electrical for your new e-car. So this is really simple, and we're going to talk about other things. This is really simple. If you're going to buy an e-car, think about what you need. You don't buy the horse before the trailer, right? No, it's the other way around. You don't buy the trailer before the horse. I'm kidding with you. By buying the car, you think it's the horse. It's not. It's the trailer. You need to know everything about what this car needs. How am I going to charge it? Are you really going to drive every day to an e-charging station and stop for a Mr. Sub or whatever and have a coffee at Tim Hortons while you're waiting for your charge? The answer is no. We are going to want them in our home, and we're going to want to do this first. Then go look for your car and make sure that you get. Is it advisable? That's a good question that just popped in my head. Is it advisable to do a level 3 in your house? No, because it's 800 volts.
No, we don't do any of that. Level 3 chargers are not for residential. They have level 1 chargers, which are typically plugged into a normal 15 amp outlet. Make sure it's a dedicated circuit though. Like your 15 amp that you have in your garage is typically tied into, it's typically tied
another
into
receptacle.
Yeah, other plugs, lights, whatever.
Right.
Make sure that that is a dedicated circuit for that level 1 charger.
Every receptacle is allowed to have 12 devices, right? So when you look at that, a switch, a light, a receptacle, so every circuit, I should say, is allowed to have 12 devices. When it comes to your garage, it's the same thing. When it comes to your outside plugs of your house, they must be a dedicated receptacle on the outside. That's because it's on a GFI. That's another story. I don't want to confuse you on this, but that's a good point. It may not be a dedicated receptacle for the full 15 amp charge. How much would it be on a slow charge? Does it draw?
It will draw 12 amps continuously,
12 amps.
And it will draw it for 16 hours. So normally, when you plug in your toaster, which is plugs into a normal 15 amp breaker on a normal circuit, you plug in your toaster or your kettle.
For 2 minutes.
It runs for a minute, 2 minutes, and then shuts off. Whereas this load is continually drawing 12 amps for, as I said, 16, 18 hours.
So that's even a good point there. That means that no matter what, we're not thinking, right? It's like the kettle, the toaster, 2 minutes, you don't use it much, so it's not going to cause a possible heat up on the electrical lines on the breaker. But even on a trickle charge to the new e-car on a 15 amp breaker, pulling 12 amps, that's a vacuum cleaner. Again, you're not gonna vacuum for 18 hours, 15 hours, you're not gonna do that. That's going to continuously pull that draw. So we even have to think about the trickle charge, which I recommend you charge your vehicle on a trickle charge. As a matter of fact, I read books on this that your car should be charged, 5 times to every one-time power charge? Now, I guess that's based on your car. What I'm saying is to make the longevity of the battery life, it needs trickle charges more than power charges. And I think due to convenience, people are going to pull the car home and plug it into the power charge. The smarter ones will use their phone and give it a slower charge. I mean, man, I'm thinking of businesses galore here. We need apps that can say it should be on a trickle charge. It can be on a power charge. Can you do a variable charge? Like, I see a new business here, I really do. But this is about fires, and this is about permits and your safety. Going back to my daughter's house, they have 2 electric vehicles in the garage every single night, and they just plug them in. I don't even know if they're thinking about the amount of power that's being pulled. That is a brand new home. It's a big home. It's full of electrical power. They're getting a hot tub. They're getting everything. The more I think about that a family has 2 cars, and if they were both plugged in, getting a full 48 amp charge, we're now talking 88 amps of power. Going back to an old house, your house would not be able to supply that power to those vehicles at 100 amp service at all.
That's correct.
Like you would be blowing all kinds of stuff because if you have an air conditioner, right away you're over the limit. Just with an air conditioner. If you got a stove, you're over the limit. You're over the limit. This really means that this new world we're living in, we got to move to 200 amps. Are we ever going to get to the point where we're going to be a 400 amp home?
They do have that on larger homes,
Square
but it's
footage.
rare. It's based on square footage. It's the exception. But you make a very good point about increasing the service size, because there are still a lot of homes out there that are 60 amp service. Some, most of homes are 100 amp service. Some have been upgraded to 125, but they're not able to handle more than one electric vehicle.
One.
So that's why they've come up with what they call energy management systems that
Okay.
will allow for monitoring of how much charge is on an existing vehicle, say vehicle number 1, and then be able to look at vehicle number 2 and say, well, it needs a little more charge because it's lower, so we'll put the effort there. And they monitor it, so they are able to divert more load to the one car that needs more charge than the other one.
So this would be like Eaton, is this a product that they brought out that is smart enough to take on 2 cars and allow that to be balanced? Eaton has got a brand new charging, I'm going to call it an e-port. I don't even know the exact name, but it's okay, you can look it up. And this is state of the art. I think years ago, like, they saw this coming and they really started putting the intellect into this product, which then leads me to the point we need to learn about what do we need as a charging station in our home, and where should the charging station go? Is that a good question?
That's an excellent question, because location of the panel relative to where the actual charging station is, you're going to have to make sure that you can run the circuits properly. But not only that, you want to be sure that the charging station is approved for the location. So if it's outside, it has to be approved for exposure to weather. If it's inside your garage, it might be approved for a dry location. So you have to look at what the actual enclosure rating is. And there are ones that are rated to be mounted outside that you can then plug your car into and have it, like you talked about, where somebody doesn't have a garage and they just want to park it on their driveway. Yep, that's absolutely suitable. So, but make sure that you're looking for a certification mark to make sure it's a certified product and approved for the location where it's going to be installed.
Inside or outside?
Yep.
This is pretty simple to me. It's what do you need for the car that you have, or the 2 cars that you have? What do we need to do to make sure it's safe for our family and anyone that's in the area? Because that is a really big draw of electricity, a really big draw. I mean, look at pros and cons. Gas has gone through the roof, and I should say fuel. Fuel's gone through the roof, and I think it's going to keep going. I said this years ago that when we paid $2 for a bottle of water, we were actually paying more money for water than consumption of fuel. And it was just a matter of time. And now the world's jumping on this bandwagon of charging for everything, including food. Man, I can go on about the uppages of way too much that's happening. I'm still mad about fuel. I don't like the idea that my truck costs $230 to $240 to fill. It just doesn't make sense to me anymore. But it is the reason, I'm starting to wonder, is it a push that everyone should have an electric vehicle? Is there a backup to that? I don't think so. I think this is just a cash grab left, right, and center. But don't fall for the cash grab when it comes to your electric vehicle at your home. I'm going to say it again. If your house burns, insurance isn't going to cover it unless you got a permit. And that's why I have James here from ESA, because they know based on the numbers of sales, based on the number of permits, that people aren't pulling permits. And that's a bad thing. Would you give a percentage about how many are not pulling permits? You even know?
Wow, that's a tough one. We're seeing thousands of electric vehicles being shipped into the GTA every month, and we're only seeing a small fraction of actual permits. In 1 year, we found over 400 working without a permit that had serious defects, and that was just, we did that on one team in one area of the city, and I know it's widespread. This is a real concern, and we just want to make sure that people do it right. We want to make sure that people do it safely. We want to make sure that at the end of the day, I'm not in your home. I'm not plugging your car in. I just want to make sure that you can drive your car home at the end of the day, plug it in safely, know that it's not going to affect either your home infrastructure or your family, and everybody's going to be able to sleep safely. That's what it's all about.
Maybe there's a way that, information packages, not, holy cow. I mean, it's got to start from the top. And the top is the places that sell electric cars. That's the top. Because they should be telling homeowners, by the way, you need to get a permit. It's not terrible. It's only maybe 71 bucks, 75 bucks, whatever it is. It's under 100 bucks. I'll tell you that much for the permit. You're going to need a proper charge station. Is it outside? Is it inside? You know, it should start at the top. Is that what we need to do, is start off with them?
I really feel we need to get the messaging from them, but the homeowner needs to ask that question. Please provide me with the certificate of acceptance. Show me the certificate that ESA has been here, has looked at it, and has signed off on it.
That's if you buy a place with it?
I don't care when it was, whether it was old or new. You just take out a permit, have it inspected, have us come and look at it. That's the bottom line. We want to make sure that ESA is engaged with every one of these installations.
Here's something I don't think people know, is that you as a homeowner can just call up ESA and say, I've had this installed. Can you come take a look at it?
Absolutely.
And they'll come.
Yeah, we'll come. We'll schedule it. We'll make sure that we look at it. If there's a problem, we'll identify the defects. You can call back the contractor, wherever you had to do it right, make it right. You're all about making it right. I know you are. We've worked with you for years, and that's the key. Like, do it right the first time. Forget about this idea of cutting a corner and saving a buck, or, you know, here's something. Somebody says, oh, you can, a contractor who claims to be a contractor, is just a handyman, says, just tell the ESA that I did it. Well, like, I didn't fall off the turnip truck yesterday, and all we do is we simply ask a couple minor questions like, did you actually install it? Like, what size wire did you use? What size breaker did you tie it into? And most people will have no idea, and yet they claim that they did the installation. Like, really? Like, just hire a licensed contractor, use certified product, and get it inspected. Ask for that certificate.
That is simple. But we're seeing an escalated issue that it is not that simple. And I don't know why. Why is that? Are you not worried about your house burning? Are you not worried that, are you really thinking you're saving money by not checking? It doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense to me either.
One thing's very clear to me is that this is the future, buying electrical vehicles. This is the future. And if we don't pay attention to the electrical consumption that vehicle needs and doing it safely, we are going to have a whole another issue coming. And that's going to be houses burning down left, right, and center and people dying, which is going to cause an issue. Remember, nothing out there, and I keep talking about this, especially when it comes to code, nothing happens until someone dies. And it's a shame. I hate that. I really do. But we're supposed to follow all minimum, I keep doing that, codes. It's minimum. That's our duty. If you don't do that, then we're causing issues. And when someone dies, all hell breaks loose, and someone's going to pay the piper. That's the truth. Someone always pays the pipers. You see the scaffolds that fall on the side of the building. Someone dies. There's a lot of people that get fined for that because a safety violation has been slightly pushed away. Stuff happens, but somebody pays the piper. Let's not have it be you. We're living in a new age right now where we have hot tubs, air conditioners, you name it, electric vehicles. Holy cow, we have so many electric things. And I mean, we're plugging in our phones. We're plugging in everything. The problem that I'm seeing right now, and the most important thing is that we as homeowners don't realize our own consumption. We're wondering why that monthly bill has gone through the roof. And I'm talking about your electrical bill. Why has it gone through the roof? Well, we're plugging in all kinds of things. The most important thing you can do is to talk to a licensed electrical contractor, not the store you bought the car from. You can start there. But how do you know it's a licensed electrical contractor? How many people do I meet going, are you licensed? Oh, I'm licensed. Yep. Are you insured? Sure I am. Show me. Proof. Show me your license. Show me. Do you know no one only one person in the history of all the work I've ever done asked if I was licensed and insured, and asked to see it. And I actually had it, and I showed them the boat. Only one person in all my life.
That's amazing.
So if that's happened to me, how many times has it happened to a possible contractor?
Yeah.
Ask for the license. It's really important because that licensed electrical contractor can come into your home to wire up for your car, but do a double check to make sure that your house is capable of that kind of draw. That if there's any other electrical problems while they're there, they can address them to make it safe for your family. Like, this makes sense to me.
Yeah, and master electricians are very proud of the fact that they're a master electrician.
Well, they should be.
Yeah, licensed electricians are very proud that they're working for a licensed electrical contractor. Two different things. A licensed electrician is a 309. He's got his electrical license. Electrical contractor has an ECRA number, ECRA/ESA. You can go on our website, find a contractor, find a local contractor. It's just a couple clicks, and it'll pop up, and you can find the number of all the licensed electrical contractors. If you can't find a licensed electrical contractor on our website, they're not licensed.
See, ESA made it easy for you. All you got to do is double check their website. Something else, I guess, with the wonderful phones that we're playing with, and my God, everyone's texting me and trying to get in touch with me right now as I'm doing a podcast, but we'll get back to them, is that a family app means they could play with the car. Is that correct? In other words, son Tony, I didn't say Joe, did you notice that? Son Tony, he changes the charge to the car. Dad, he's got it set. I'm going to assume there's a program. You can set a program. I want to charge you this much for this time, this much for that time, just in an app. This could be confusing to the family, couldn't it?
Yeah, because all the new cars come with an app, and they all have it. So you can change the charge rate right on the phone within a couple clicks, and if you exceed the rating that it's designed for, you've got a problem. And here's what we always recommend. Wire it and install it to the nameplate of the charger. So if the charger is designed to be able to deliver 48 amps, it'll be wired with a 60 amp wire, 60 amp breaker, it'll be proper, everything matches. So even if he decides to charge it slower or decides to go full charge, it all matches, it all works, everything is safe.
What is the gauge of a 60 amp?
It's a number 6 copper.
I thought it was.
A number 6 copper wire.
Which is a thick copper line and a very expensive one, just so you know. That's going to be the biggest cost is your wire.
Yep. But listen, the price of installing it right the first time is nothing. Well, relatively low in comparison to having to tear it all out and redo it.
Well, I just want to keep reminding people, your home is the single most expensive investment of your life. So if you had to pay a couple bucks more for a 6-gauge line to protect your home, never mind your family, how much is your family worth? Do it right the first time. Jeez, it's funny. Where did I hear that before?
I love it.
Let's talk about red flags for a second, because red flags are important. I always believe that everyone out there has a personal instinct the red flag has been waved, whether they've lied or they've deceived. You get that from a feel of a person. So red flags to a contractor that you want to actually wire your car for in your home, in your e-charge, what are some of the red flags that you've heard of?
Well, some of the classic ones are, can you take out the permit for me? Or just call ESA and say you did the job, which is like...
Means they're not licensed.
Means they're not licensed. If they can't produce an ECRA number, an electrical contract registry agency, ECRA for short, if they can't produce that number, they're not licensed.
Well, that means they're not entitled to call for a permit, correct?
That's correct. They won't be able to take out a permit.
Right.
If they try to say, listen, just pay me cash and don't worry about a receipt, don't worry about inspection, everything's done right, don't worry about it, you know that's a red flag right away. If they're not willing to give you an invoice with the logo, the actual ECRA logo that shows that they're part of the ESA, they have their ESA number right on their invoice. If they don't have that on their invoice, they're not registered. If they don't have it on the side of their truck or their vehicle, okay, maybe they rented the truck, but most service trucks, they're very proud of the fact they spent years training and writing exams. They're so proud to put that number on their vehicle. If you don't see that number on their vehicle, chances are they're not registered. They're not with us.
Depending on where you live, the most important thing you do is pull a permit. Here in Ontario is the Electrical Safety Authority. There's only 2 people that can pull out a permit. That is a licensed electrical contractor in that phrase, or the homeowner who's going to attempt to do the electrical themselves, which I think is great because the ESA will come in and work with you to do the electrical so it's done properly. Permits pulled, permits passed, everyone's safe. You've got a package to resell your house. In other parts of the country, in other parts of the world, like the United States, everyone's going to have their own rules. What I'm trying to say to you is the number 1 rule is that you do it right. You do it safe. You pull your permits no matter where you live, and you have a licensed person make sure it's done. And please have it inspected because we're going here anyways. So do it right the first time. Thanks, James.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
This episode is brought to you by Improve Canada, Canada's largest home improvement center. Check out improvecanada.com. If you like the show, check out the episode page on makeitright.ca for more tips.